Having the right attorney is a key component when buying or selling a business. I have seen firsthand the value that a seasoned mergers and acquisitions attorney can add for their clients. Let me tell you about a law firm that I have worked with and would highly recommend for anyone thinking about buying or selling a business. Benjamin, Gusson and Associates. They are a law firm that has been representing buyers and sellers of businesses for more than 30 years. Believe me, they are experts. Not just experts in business transactions, but also real estate and tax guidance, which are both often required when buying or selling a business. From the initial steps reviewing the letter of intent, right through to closing, the attorneys at Benjamin Gusson provide the personalized service and experience needed for putting the pieces together for a successful and flawless transaction. I've known the lead M&A partner, Lee Gusson, for many years, and I have never hesitated referring a client to him. So if you're looking to buy or sell a business, feel free to reach out to Lee at 847-861-6220. That's 847-861-6220. I thank them for sponsoring today's episode and hope you enjoy it.
Looking to buy, sell, or grow your business to position it for a sale? As the owner and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, Dominic Rinaldi has personally been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. He has seen and done it all, consulting with large and small businesses across a broad range of industries. On M&A Unplugged, he'll interview buyers, sellers, and their advisors about their experiences scaling, selling, and acquiring businesses. On every episode, you will get key learnings, but most importantly, you will be better prepared for your own acquisition or sale. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Dominic Rinaldi.
CLM Equity was formed by two roommates and friends with the express purpose of acquiring a business. After more than a decade in corporate America and surviving the Great Recession of 2008, Matt Locci and Scott Maze set their sights on owning their own business, building value for themselves, and controlling their own destiny. Scott had spent 12 plus years in the aerospace industry and early in his career was in a rotational program that allowed him to touch various aspects of the manufacturing process, ultimately running an aftermarket business development effort. Matt, on the other hand, spent most of his career in finance and accounting. He had the opportunity to work in multiple industries, but found that he really enjoyed his time when he worked finance for a manufacturing-focused ERP provider. So it was no surprise with their complementary skill sets that Scott and Matt launched a business search focused on manufacturing. And I'm so grateful that our firm got to represent them in their acquisition of Zircon Precision Products, an aerospace and commercial components manufacturer. Matt and Scott, thank you for being here, and I'm so excited to have you share your journey with the M&A Unplugged community.
Happy to be here, Dominic. Thanks for having us.
So guys, you completed the transaction when did you get the transaction done?
It happened April 22nd.
April 22nd. So you've got a bunch of months here that you've been operating. Let's start with, and then we're going to go back and I want to hear your journey, but let's start with how did training and transition and integration go for the two of you?
Scott, why don't you start?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been really seamless and actually pretty easygoing, if that's the right word to use to describe it. The former owner, Bruce, and his wife, Terry, are just phenomenal people and really have been a great partner in transitioning from their ownership to our ownership. You know, we focus really on keeping as much as we could the same for all the employees, about 21 employees right now, and worked very hard to make sure that it was seamless for them as it could be, and worked with Terry and Bruce to really understand their roles and how they fit into the business and what they did from a day-to-day standpoint. So we're continuing to do that, but it's been 3 months now. And again, just really the ease of working with Terry and Bruce has made it a seamless process as we really step up the efforts to put our focus and our spin on what we want to do with Zircon.
So the previous owner has stayed on helping you with the business and plans to do so for some period of time, I understand. Were there any surprises or anything that caught you off guard as you took over the reins of the day-to-day operation?
Not necessarily any big surprises. Again, we worked really hard up front to make sure we had a good understanding of what they did, who their customers were. And fortunately, with my experience in the industry, I'm working with some of the same names and literally some of the same people that I've worked with in the past that came across our desk. So that's been really interesting and exciting to see. It's a big but small world in the aerospace world. And I've ran into several past colleagues through this journey so far. Matt, did you have any major surprises or aha moments as we got started?
From a finance, accounting, HR standpoint, I haven't really come across any surprises. I think one of the biggest benefits throughout this whole process was, Scott, you kind of touched on already, we really tried to keep it as seamless as possible for the employees. So, for example, their benefits all stayed the same. We grandfathered in their seniority, so their vacation stayed the same and everything. So it was really almost as if we were stepping in and, through our due diligence and preparation for the transaction, we really limited the potential surprises, I think.
That's awesome. I talk to our community all the time about how important it is to embrace the employees and make sure that, they know that they're wanted and their input is valued and that you don't make any disruptive changes. And so I'm so glad to hear that integration has gone well for you so far, because that's such an important first step. So let's go back to the beginning then. Let's learn a little bit about the two of you. You first met after college. You were, I understand, roommates. Just talk a little bit about that, and then talk about when you first both decided that maybe owning a business together and becoming partners might make sense.
Scott, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'll give the first part of that a stab. So, yeah, I had moved to Connecticut about a year prior to Matt and was working on this rotational program with the company that I was with, and had been there for a little while and came across a situation where, hey, just looking for someone to fill a spot in a roommate situation, and came across Matt as he was moving to the area, transitioning into, personal finance, right, Matt? You could talk about that.
Yep, exactly. So I had relocated to Connecticut for work. I was living in my best friend's parents' basement for a while until I could actually find a place to live, which I then came across Scott, and we started living together. This was almost 10 years ago now. And then we had on and off talked about the possibility one day of saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we took control and put our talents, to use for ourselves? And it kind of died down a little bit after a while. And then, probably a few years ago, it really picked back up. I kind of pushed Scott, I guess, and said, hey, if we're going to do this, now's a better time than ever. And we started to put things into place personally, professionally, to get ready for this. So it was kind of developed over a decade, I would say, until we actually pulled the trigger.
So talk a little bit more about what was your preparation to pull things together personally and professionally? What steps did you take?
Sure. So, personally, it was kind of just getting our house in order, if you will, and making sure that, we had, the necessary capital raised and how we were going to do this, having families and then getting everything into kind of the right position, if you will, professionally, to the point where we knew at some point we were going to be leaving our jobs. And so we had to prepare and kind of the timing of that and make sure that we were okay with that for a certain amount of time, because, once you make the leap, that's it. Scott, how about you?
Yeah, no, I would just to echo your comments there. Definitely was a challenge, and we focused on it for quite a while and really put our heads together about what we would like to look for in a business. Fortunately, Matt and I both know several people who have owned small businesses, whether it's in manufacturing or finance or distribution. And we tapped into all those resources. We said, hey, can we take you out to dinner? Can we talk to you? This is kind of what we're looking to do. What are your thoughts and your recommendations. Obviously, we see what you guys have done with your small businesses or medium-sized businesses, and we kind of want to get some information from everybody and get some direction and really tap into those people around us that have done it, so to speak. So we did a lot of that. I think we met with 4 different people across 4 different industries, really.
So were there some key takeaways that you got from those meetings? Were there 1 or 2 things that you pulled away and said, wow, these were great pieces of information and we got to make sure that we do this?
Yes, absolutely. I think the biggest one was stick with what you know, right? Stick with what you know, which was the aerospace industry. I felt very comfortable operating in that space, knowing the players, knowing how to deal with these large corporations and the government from my previous work experience. So I think that was the biggest one. And then just try to position yourself to be structured the right way to be most advantageous for what we're trying to accomplish.
What do you mean by that? Structured? What do you mean by structured the right way?
I would just say how we set up the business, and also working with people that can help you, right? There's no reason for us to go it alone, right? There's lots of resources out there to help with this type of thing, like Sun Acquisitions. And so that guidance was really important to us and very much worth the value to make sure this went right, because it's obviously important and our livelihoods depend on it.
And were your families on board? I mean, were they nervous? How did your families take this?
I'll start first. My wife thought that we were crazy. I remember the night that I told her that we're actually going to move forward and we're going to do this and we're going to pursue it. But that being said, after, she got over the bit of surprise and everything, it turned into, I think, a lot more excitement than anything. I mean, there's always some nervousness sprinkled in there, but my wife was very supportive and my family as well. When I, spoke with, my siblings and my parents and relatives, they were all very supportive and which made it a lot easier, I guess, just to stay focused and keep reaching for your goals and your dreams. And that's kind of what's my experience.
Yeah, I agree with that too. My wife, she always said, hey, why don't you do something for yourself and for us? And so she was supportive of that idea. The idea of being far away and the travel and moving possibly was a little more unsettling, but definitely something that we worked through and talked through. But the really great thing is, even with my boss and people that I used to work with, everyone was like, that is great. That is awesome. Good for you. We're so happy for you. Everyone is very excited to see, hey, you're going to make it a go on your own and see how it works out. And so the confidence from people around us and I mean, no one was like, oh, why would you ever do that? So definitely this support was around us from all aspects.
So great to hear that you guys had the support. It's so important when you're going out to contemplate an acquisition that you've got the support, either from your families or if you're running a business from your management team. So really critical. So guys, when do you remember the date on the calendar when you both said, okay, we're forming the entity and here we go, full steam ahead?
Scott, do you remember?
Yeah, I have a calendar. I actually circled a couple dates. The first one we really met was January 2018. January 27th rings a bell. But that was when we hey, this was the first meeting, we're going to make this happen. Let's start putting things in place.
And what were your first couple of steps? So you decided you're going to go, you picked your name and you were ready to go. What were your first couple of steps out of the box?
So our first couple steps were really just each night we would actually get on the computer and we would talk to each other every night. Probably from January 2018 up until we made the purchase of the business, we were speaking with each other every night about everything that we could and just keep brainstorming. And the first few steps, if I can remember right, we basically just looked at each other on the computer and we said, yes, okay, we're going to do this. Now what do we do? We essentially had built up all of this effort to do it, and now we have to actually figure out how to do this. And so our first few steps was going out there on the internet first and just looking at businesses that are for sale that we could just find and kind of just start to look at how they were being presented and And as Scott touched on, being in that aerospace industry. So we really focused our initial search on what we know, and that was aerospace manufacturing. So we started to just do some research on some businesses really together and just started talking about it and looking at numbers. And we quickly realized how big of a task it was going to become within probably the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, I remember getting together and we met and we said, hey, what does a good acquisition look like? What are the things, the characteristics, the traits, whatever that may be, location, that kind of stuff? What is important to us? We wrote all that down and we just started documenting really what we thought it would be, and then working with others around us and talking to people. And then once we really had that fine-tuned is when we started reaching out and said, okay, well, let's look for some professional services to help us navigate the waters through this process.
So you came up with your criteria, you agreed on, these are the parameters. It might be size of business, geography, what you wanted. Obviously you were focused on aerospace. So you came up with your criteria, and it sounds like you went out and looked at some businesses on your own and sort of got the feel of what was out there in the market. And what made you decide, okay, you know what, we probably should, hire somebody to help us do this transaction rather than do it ourselves?
Sure. So a pretty simple answer to that probably is this was our first transaction, and we thought to ourselves in doing our research and, getting into, this arena that we were about to enter, we did not feel comfortable going it alone, because you quickly realize as we were doing research, there are so many aspects. And then even, we found out down the road, there were so many more that we didn't even think about, once we actually got into it. But, I think, and Scott, you can obviously add some color to this. My main focus it was our first transaction. And, to be honest, we didn't want to mess it up.
Yeah, it could be a big mistake if you don't do it the right way.
Right.
So talk just briefly about your criteria, what your criteria was, and then we'll skip forward to the transaction. Once you identified something you liked, and what your experience was in that. But what was your criteria?
Well, we really wanted to stick either in the precision machining or assembly fabrication services segment in aerospace. I think we targeted 17 states all over the country based on aerospace presence in those states that are advantageous to do business in, those types of things, states that are geographically favorable to us personally. So we targeted those 17 states, and really obviously revenue. We had a revenue range that we thought we could attain based on our upfront capital that we had available and what we thought would be a good fit for us. And from there, we just went through that process and started working with Sun, obviously. And I think we talked to about a dozen different companies maybe on the phone and really narrowed that down to 4 or 5 or 6 that, hey, these might really work. And we think we went to visit 2 different locations. Once we made that visit to Zircon in November, it was like, well, yeah, this one's a real good fit, right? And let's see if we can figure out how to make this one work.
Yeah, so I Scott, you just offered a great piece of advice to folks and M&A podcast community. I want to make sure that we capture this. When you're out there looking for a business to acquire, and it's it doesn't matter if it's your first one or it's your 10th one, you really want to make sure that you're looking at a good cross section of businesses within an industry sector or geography or whatever it is, because it's so important to get the feel for what's out there, how are businesses operating, what value ranges there might be. And so, it'll give you great comfort when you do pull the trigger on a deal that you want to do, that you just haven't looked at one deal and closed the door on it, unless you really know very narrowly what kind of business you want. It's so smart to go out and meet with a number of different potential businesses to acquire. And it also, quite frankly, if you're out in the marketplace as a buyer, it gives you a bit of leverage. If you're working with one target, that's not near enough leverage. When you're working with 6, Now you've got your choice of businesses potentially. So Matt and Scott, you find Zircon, you start to realize, all right, this is maybe the business. Bring us through the process. What transpired from there, and really for the M&A Unplugged community, talk about the things that one, maybe you had anticipated, but also the things that you didn't anticipate. That as you went through the process, you're like, wow, I had no idea that was going to happen, and how you overcame those.
Scott, you want to start?
Yeah, well, I guess I would say once we did the site visit is really when it's like, okay, this one looks really good, and how we want to progress. So as for, the whole entire process was new to us, but once it gets going and once the ball is rolling, if you have a motivated seller and motivated buyers like we were, things can happen relatively quickly. So I think we visited, November 16th, 17th timeframe, and we closed the deal there in April 22nd. So there was definitely some speed bumps in the road. One thing that ended up happening with this, we didn't realize was going to be a problem at first, is that the building was not owned by the owner of the business. His mother-in-law owned the building. So that threw a little different dynamic into it. And not that it was hard to work through, but just something that we weren't expecting to have to deal with. But it really worked out well. And just added a few more sleepless nights to the process, if anything, really. I don't know what else you might want to add to kind of how it all came together.
Yeah. So, one of the important things I'm going to go back to is kind of what we touched on before, and not going it alone. So we engaged Sun and worked with Larry and Joe, and really when the speed bumps occurred, this is where I thought us not going it alone, inexperienced, really created the value to keep the ball rolling and to smooth out the bumps. Because as Scott kind of touched on, we had a little issue with the real estate, but there was also so many things that came up that maybe me and Scott freaked out about initially, but then after some conversation, everything calmed down and it kept the ball rolling. Because one thing we definitely learned, I think, through the process was to be flexible. That the buyer's not going to get everything they asked for, and the seller's not going to get everything they asked for. But if they're both motivated, you can find a common ground, and having somebody with us to kind of help us and keep that ball rolling really helped. I would say as it got towards the end of the transaction process, we really started to feel some fatigue. And we just, we wanted it to just happen already. And we thought that, having some other people in our corner that could push the ball down the road really helped. But one of the things we really learned through the process was that we had to be flexible.
Yeah, in that regard, you had a couple of things come up that I remember. That one, you really didn't want to own real estate, but you realized that the owner probably wasn't going to sell this business without the real estate, and so that became an important component. So you had to pivot there, and thankfully, the two of you, ultimately wanted to do that. But if I remember correctly, you also wound up with a situation where the owner of the business had changed their accounting methodology at the last minute, which changed the financial picture. Now, it was only on paper, was what wound up happening, but it threw the banks into a tizzy and the deal, into a spiral there for a little bit until we could figure it out.
It was wild. It included the seller going directly to IRS offices, local IRS offices. It involved a lot of extra paperwork. One of the things that we never thought about when we initially started this was the timing. Of course, there's no time like the present, but having the time where we were going through the transaction be over the holidays and then changing over the years really presented a challenge, because then all of a sudden the bank wanted the financials for 2018, for example, right? And we couldn't get them to the bank for a while, until February or so. So there was maybe a 3 or 4 week period where we were at a standstill because of all of this. Really couldn't move forward, which was a little scary.
Yeah. So what you experienced is what almost every buyer and seller experiences. There really aren't any clean deals. Every deal has got twists and turns. And what really matters is that you have advisors there that can help guide you through that process. Or if you've been through it before, you know what to anticipate and expect, and it doesn't throw you for a loop. So
Exactly.
talk a bit about the financing. So you had your own capital to invest in this, but you also used an SBA loan to pull us off. What was your experience with that process in securing an SBA facility?
Sure. Well, other than it was a stack of paper, probably 2 feet thick, it was actually pretty smooth. It was a lot of, the bank has all these requirements from the business and the financials, and putting them together and having conversations and going back with the financing. Us purchasing the real estate actually helped us when we did the math, because first it stretched out the term of our loan, which was ultimately great for us. So the net outlay was actually the same, whereas if, say, for example, we would have had purchased the business and paid rent to an owning entity at fair market value. So it worked out really well. The bank was flexible at some points that I thought they weren't going to be flexible, and they were really tight in other areas. But we made sure to get them everything as soon as possible to keep it rolling. And we were also able to secure a credit line, which we deemed to be very important at the time. Again, they, operating capital. So they were able to secure that as well for us. So all in all, it was great. We worked with a financing broker who went out and shopped the deal to a few lenders to find us the best one for our situation. So it ended up working really well. Again, we had that mindset of not going it alone and working with people who are knowledgeable in these areas that we need the assistance in to make sure that we got a good deal.
You just hit on another key element here that, so important to you shop your deal to multiple banks, because and it could be, one bank you go to one day is willing to do a deal and favorable terms, and you can go to the same bank a week later and maybe something has changed internally. And so it's so important when you're looking to finance a transaction that you really get the perspective from a couple of different banks to realize, what is the best package, the overall package out there when you're looking to do a deal. So absolutely. So guys, how is the business doing? And what are your plans for it? And maybe, just talk a little bit about what the business does specifically and how it's doing.
Yeah, so we're a precision aerospace machine shop. We produce parts for big names in the aerospace industry that supply companies like Boeing and Airbus and Lockheed and so on and so forth. So we have a plethora of mill and turning centers where we do a lot of multi-access machining for primarily aluminum parts, housings, covers, small component parts for larger assemblies, that kind of thing. We do a little bit of sub-assembly in-house. And again, we've got a team of about 21 people. The shop is about 13,000 square feet. And a really great team that's been built there at Zircon, and we are happy to work with them. Really, our plans is we've been we've been 5S'ing a lot, which is an aerospace or a lean term, right? We're cleaning up a lot of old stuff, so to speak, and really trying to say, okay, what do we have to work with here? We've got some machines we're looking to sell to create some floor space so that we can reinvest in the business and really grow. And one, I guess, kind of thinking back at some of the things we've been talking about, one surprise, one of Matt and I's focused, and one things we really wanted to do when we first got in there, hey, for the first 6 months, we don't want to do anything to upset the apple cart. We want to, hey, let's maintain status quo. Let's keep doing what you've been doing, not really go in there and try to make too many changes up front, to really understand and say, hey, here's where our strengths are, here's where our weaknesses are, here's what we have in the way of opportunities. And 2 weeks into it, our largest customer says, hey, we want you to come to our site and we want to talk about a big project that we're working on. And so here we go to our largest customer. we're sitting in a room with 6 of our competitors, and they say, hey, we've got all this work that we want to change from sand castings or different castings into hog outs, where you take a solid piece of material and machine it to the desired state of essentially that casting. So it's a great opportunity to grow, but it's like, well, this is not really what we had in mind for how we wanted things to go. And so you can't say no to that. So, we went through a big effort to quote a large package, and we're waiting to hear back about that. But that work requires capital investment almost immediately. So that's going to be a challenge, but we're already talking to people that can help us with that. And yeah, I've learned more in the last 3 months than I feel like I learned in the previous 10 years. So it's pretty crazy.
Well, it's great to hear that you've got such significant opportunities right out of the box. So I wish you guys the best of luck there. That's awesome.
Right. Focusing on strategic growth. We don't want to overwhelm our shop by any means, but again, growth is definitely on the to-do list. So we got to make sure we do it the right way, though.
Yeah. So guys, just in wrapping up, I'd love for you to both maybe share with the M&A Unplugged community if there are 1 or 2 things that you would offer up to other people who are out there contemplating, acquiring a business. What are the 1 or 2 big takeaways that you would offer to them?
Sure. I'll go first. Mine will be probably short and sweet, but pointed. I would say be flexible, be thorough, and be motivated.
Great.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, Matt. And we've touched on this multiple times, but again, having the right team of people around you, just like our shop has a great team that works well together. Our team during this process was, again, brokers, attorneys, accountants, the whole 9 yards of people that we really trusted, right? That had a great track record. And that really made the process as seamless as it could be. And then I keep going back to, I don't know if we're lucky or we're good, but we're very fortunate. The previous owners are just wonderful people, and you find that all over the place. But they want nothing but our success and want nothing to do but to help us achieve that success, because it's their legacy too. I mean, the company is 60 plus years old, and it's been family owned up until now, and so it's been really a great process and a great transition working with the previous owners and understanding what kind of their experience in the history of it all. Because I think the history of it's very important also.
Yeah. Well, guys, Scott and Matt, so happy for you that you found the right opportunity for both of you, and that things are going so well. Integration's gone well, and I really appreciate you both being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
So M&A Unplugged community, let me just recap a few things that Scott and Matt brought up that I think are really key takeaways. One, you heard them talk about the fact that they kept things seamless when it came to the employees. We talk about this time and time again. I believe employees are the most valuable asset of your company. Treat them well, treat them with care. Scott and Matt did that, and it'll make for a very smooth transition and really lay the groundwork for them to do tremendous things going forward. Stick with what you know. On multiple levels, that's so important. One, when you know something, it's easy to slot into a business when you acquire it. But in addition to that, when you go for a bank loan, banks want to know that you have transferable experience for that opportunity. So really it's so important on many levels to be sticking with, what you know and your core competencies. When you're out there searching for a business, vet multiple opportunities. Don't get enamored with one and go down the path. Really do your homework, visit a bunch of different companies, get comfortable. When you see the right one, you'll know it because you would have had a lot of things to compare it to. Scott and Matt also talked about the importance of having a motivated buyer and a motivated seller. So critical to ultimately getting a deal done, because 100% of deals are going to have issues. But when you have a motivated buyer and a motivated seller, you can get through those issues. People will be creative and you'll figure it out. And advisors, having experienced advisors wrapped around you, M&A attorneys, M&A accountants, a good M&A broker, all who can advise you every step of the way, because they hopefully have seen hundreds of deals and nothing that they'll see will be new to them. And then the last couple of things are, when it comes time to go source a loan, work with multiple banks. You really want to make sure that you're sourcing the right bank loan and that you've got a good partner in a bank as well. And then Scott and Matt talked about deal fatigue. We see it a lot. Deals will stretch out, especially at the end. Things will start to come up, and you'll see that even little things will stretch out and you'll get tired. You need to stick through that, break through the wall, be patient, but keep moving the ball forward. So I want to again thank Scott and Matt for being our guests today. They really shared so many key takeaways with us. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you would like to learn more about the process of acquiring or selling a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com or feel free to reach out to me at drinaldi@sunacquisitions.com. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.
Thank you for joining us today on M&A Unplugged. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and recommend it wherever you get your podcasts. If you want more great information on how to scale, acquire, or sell a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com.